and welcome to
Talking Who,
the only live Doctor Who internet show talking about the latest episodes, latest DVD releases, latest spin-offs,
and anything we want, really.
Just about talking about anything to do with Doctor Who, the only one in the whole of the time and space continuum.
And we also like to talk about anything that you want to talk about as well.
Yeah, well, do you know what I want to talk about at the moment?
What do you want to talk about?
What the hell's going on with my BlackBerry? That's what I want to talk about.
Well, I think what's happened is that from somewhere out in space,
this is an evil plan of the Master to absolutely destroy my ability to communicate with it.
What you'll find is that within the next 24 hours, you'll all be possessed.
Okay.
Whereas us iPhone users, you know, as they say, Macintoshes were not. They're not susceptible to viruses.
You iPhone users are already part of a cult. Okay.
Indeed. Anyway, I thought I'd just start off the show with a really nice tweet that we received. From @DitsyCompanion, Talking Who. Your last episode was amazing. Very impressed. We'll watch again.
Oh, that's nice.
Thank you very much, Ditsy Companion.
Yes, thank you. Ditsy Companion. That was Joe Grant, wasn't it?
The Ditsy Companion was that? Well, I suppose it was.
Joe Grant was the ditziest of all companions.
Yes, I suppose she was,
yes.
Wasn't she? I mean, what about some about William Hartnell's ladies?
I don't think any of them were quite as ditzy as Joe Grant, except for maybe Dodo. Actually, I would say
Dodo.
Now, people could dispute this on the message boards with me, but I felt that Dodo was the least well-defined character out of all the companions. It was just like she was there and had some lines.
I think there was a particular type, wasn't there, for William Hartnell too? It's just like a young sort of teenage, dark hair, short dark hair.
They had Susan Foreman, then they had Vicky. So you had those two characters, and they were both clearly defined characters.
Yes.
And then when they brought in Dodo, it was like, oh, he needs like a daughter kind of figure or whatever, and so they've got
the real companion in that one was Stephen, though.
Yes, oh no, he was a fully defined character, whereas Dodo,
she was sort of just there for the ride.
She was just there, said a few words, and when she left the show, she didn't even have a goodbye. It was just Ben and Polly just walked in and went, "Oh, Dodo's left. She said goodbye to you. Didn't actually want to say goodbye to you herself."
Hoovian War says, "I was never a fan of Dodo."
Well, at the same, you must have either been watching it at the time, or how could you be a fan of Dodo? There's nothing left. You've got the Ark, the Gunfighters, and the War Machines. That's about it. And
there's not much to judge her on. That's very true. Yeah.
So right now this week,
Ciplio says she was barely a character at all.
Yeah, I said there was no character. Yes. What maybe I'm wrong. Maybe something amazing happens in the Savages or something like that. But I've watched the surviving episodes, and I really just do feel like she just had some lines.
Okay, so yes, you're about to say this week. What do we have in store this week for everybody?
What do we have in store this week? Well, we've got a Frazer Hines interview.
Very exciting.
Yeah, the man in a skirt. Yeah. We're going to be reviewing the Sarah Jane Adventures, new series of the Doctor Who spin-off series, which, for most of the hardcore fans is the true spin-off series. So as we were talking about with Torchwood, if you're a fan of Doctor Who, Torchwood just really didn't actually feel like it had any connection really to the field, whereas Sarah Jane is very much...
All they could do is just drop in a reference to the Doctor every now and then on Torchwood and hope that satisfies everyone, but it doesn't, and it actually just pisses you off.
Yeah.
Pissed me off anyway.
And we will also be reviewing the latest DVD, Colony in Space.
Yes.
We'll be looking at your tweets and your messages. We'll be discussing what we thought of the last season of Doctor Who. Is it season 7 or is it season
6, 32?
32, yes.
Well, it's really series 32. I mean, as someone, when I was asking people what their favourite episode of series 6 was, someone tweeted back to me and said, it was the War Games. And technically he's correct, because the War Games is the best episode of series 6, but of course that's Patrick Townsend's series, the original series 6. So series 32, we'll be looking at that. Start getting your tweets in.
That's kind of interesting actually. In the 60s it took them 6 seasons to get through 2 Doctors. We've had 6 seasons and we've gone through 3 Doctors.
There, yeah, indeed, absolutely.
All depending on how long will Matt stay in the role for. Put in the chat message boards. How long would you like to see Matt Smith?
Would you like to see him go beyond the 50th anniversary, or do you think the 50th anniversary is regeneration time?
You know, my own feeling is I always feel that. I know Patrick Troughton came out with some, and I really wish he had never said this. It's his own opinion, but his idea is you should only do 3 years as Doctor Who. And when you look at John Pertwee and Tom Baker, you know, I just felt they were able to.
Absolutely, but the difference is in William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton.
There's how many bloody episodes a year? There was like 50 episodes a year.
I mean, they were doing the entire year.
Yes.
I mean, there was really churning them out at a rate that they would never be able to do now.
And from what I was reading towards the end of Patrick Troughton, both William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton's tenure, they were absolutely exhausted. They were like working 6 days a week, 45 weeks a year. They were completely exhausted from that workload. Whereas now they have more leisurely breaks to go off and do something else. But I think 5 years would be. I mean, you wouldn't expect a starship captain like Patrick Stewart or Scott Bakula to only do 3 years on the Enterprise.
No, not at all.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
And I still think there's more we can see out of Matt Smith, and I'd like to see him. I mean, there's a couple of other. I mean, especially Peter Davidson and Christopher Eccleston. I really would have liked. I felt another couple of years we could have actually seen so much more.
He's only just getting into his stride. You can't just end it after one more series. I hope he's around for a few more years. But look, if you agree or if you don't agree, just send in your thoughts.
Yeah. Also, oddly enough, I'm in two minds on this part, but part of me, I really love Karen Gillan.
Yes.
Largely because she's hot. But part of me would like to see Matt Smith with a different companion. A different type of companion, just to see how he would work with somebody else.
No, I agree. Yeah, and I really, really hope that the series is now established enough that we could go for an alien or a future character or a past character.
Yeah. No, I mean, in the past, the Doctor's had all kinds of.
He has indeed. We've had Victorian characters, Highlander characters. Of course, I mean, Leela was from the future, but technically she was quite primitive in the society that she was. So yeah, a different type of character.
It does seem, with the exception of Donna Noble, that everybody has kind of fitted so far the Rose Tyler kind of template.
Yeah.
You know, young, teenager, pretty, has a kind of crush on the Doctor kind of thing, which maybe they're doing because they feel that will hone in onto the audience. So. Also, I wanted to give a quick. You were mentioning another event, but I wanted to give a quick shout out to a friend of mine.
Yes,
is running a big convention at the end of the month, London Expo, and London Memorabilia, and
we will be there.
We will both be there,
indeed.
But guests at the event include Eve Miles. I can't even remember their two names. The two female American characters from Torchwood.
Yeah.
From the last series, the Doctor and the blonde American
Dr. Vera.
Dr. Vera, who got burnt.
Yes.
Kai Owen's
will be there,
indeed.
Be
there. And they've also got the very first ever signing appearance of Freema Agyeman.
That might be exclusive.
Yes.
Is it on their website yet?
It's on their website.
Okay.
First time. Oh, and did I say Eve Miles? We've got Eve Miles
there
as well.
So
we've got Eve Miles and Kai Owen together.
So we'll be there. We're actually going to be there doing a couple of web series panels. So you'll be able to come and see us.
You want to check that out? That's londonexpo.co.uk or memorabilia.co.uk. That's the last weekend, Halloween weekend. This month we'll be there. It's going to be a real fun event. Or if you just like conventions in general, you can pop by my website, starfury.co.uk.
Now, they also, at the end of the month, the Doctor Who Appreciation Society have an event called Time 5. Ianto, Gareth David Lloyd is going to be at this one as well.
He's a good guest. He's always good with the fans.
Paul Darrow, who was in Time Lash, and of course
Avon
from Blake 7.
Yep.
But they're going to be showing episode 1 in colour of Invasion of the Dinosaurs.
It's not entirely. When you say that, from what my understanding is now, I don't know how much you watching at home understand all the technical stuff that's going on in the restoration process. But a lot of episodes, right up until the end of John Pertwee's era, the BBC was in the process of junking Doctor Who episodes, and there's still 106 episodes missing from Patrick Troughton and William Hartnell's period. There's also a lot of episodes from John Pertwee's period which we don't have in the original broadcast format. It's because the version we have, they destroyed the original, but what we've had returned is something that was sent abroad. So it's either a black and white film copy, not in colour.
Because even though they were filmed in colour, when the BBC would sell them to foreign broadcasters who hadn't yet converted to colour television, they were selling them black and white versions of Doctor Who.
Yes. And or it would be an American format NTSC copy. Now, the restoration team are brilliant, and they've been doing an amazing job of restoring the John Pertwee episodes so they look almost as good as they did when they were broadcast. And the work they've done on some of the stories that were previously only available in black and white, such as the Silurians, Terror of the Autons, and particularly episode 3 of Planets of the Daleks, was amazing. Now, there's a new system they have where they can take a black and white print, and using the chroma dots in it, a computer can actually guess what the colour would have been. And you can get a kind of approximation.
Yeah.
But some work is still needed beyond that. But from what I understand, they did it on Planet of the Daleks episode 3. It's very expensive. Invasion of the Dinosaurs episode 1 hasn't got that extra work put into it. So it's kind of like a rough draft. So on the DVD you're going to have the black and white version and this kind of restored to nearly colour. I mean, I'm curious to see what it looks like though,
because the black and white version will actually look better. It'll be a crisper image as far as I understand, but of course it won't be in colour. So yeah, you'll have both options. At Time 5 they are going to be showing it in the UK for the very first time. But they're going to be showing a trailer for Reign of Terror.
Oh,
the animated episodes.
Going back to what we said about missing episodes, the Reign of Terror, episodes 4 and 5 of that story are missing, and this is the second time they've done that with an incomplete story. The restoration team at 2 Entertain, who released the DVDs, they've got somebody in. Although there's 106 episodes missing, they have sound recordings for all of them, and so what they've done is they've got the sound recordings for episode 4 and 5, and then they've animated the visuals,
which I think is a really interesting process. And I actually hope that because they're animated, in some ways it makes it a bit more accessible to a new audience, because the period of it being filmed actually doesn't matter now, because it's all just drawn and animated. But anyway, go to time5.co.uk if you're interested to attend that event. There's plenty of guests going to be there, including Dan Hall from 2 Entertain, who we interviewed a few weeks ago, and Andrew Hayden Smith, who was the young soldier in Rise of the Cybermen and Doomsday. But speaking of dinosaurs, the Invasion of Dinosaurs is coming out on DVD, and
it's coming out as part of the box set with the Android Invasion.
And here's the trailer.
Greyhound 1 to Trap 2. Greyhound 1 to Trap 2, over.
What the devil's going on?
An invasion of Earth is going on, Colonel.
Confounded cheek, how dare...
Brigadier.
Do you think you're doing, Doctor?
Beanie. Beanie. Miney. No.
Let's try the pub.
Can I get you a drink, sir?
Yes, I'll have a pint.
A pint of what?
Well, ginger pop, please.
A prehistoric monster has turned up in central London.
Why?
Good grief. It's a stegosaurus.
I'm instituting a full-scale search for the doctor at once. Shoot on sight.
Blast schemes on the way, I'm sure of it.
Millions of people will be wiped out.
Soon the Doctor and everyone on this planet will never have existed.
Hang on to your hat, Brigadier.
Could you be very kind and tell us where we are?
The androids are unstoppable, indestructible.
Hello.
Resistance is inadvisable.
Keep your hands where I can see them.
Commence the analysis of the brain.
Something will go wrong, Stigron.
Nothing will go wrong. The world will be ours.
So you do intend genocide?
I'm looking forward to that.
I've never seen the Invasion of Dinosaurs.
Haven't you?
No, I never managed to get a hold of the VHS because it was one of those very rare ones, wasn't it?
The one thing I've got to say is it depends on how you are as a fan of Doctor Who. And I remember it's one of those ones which, if you read the Target novelisation, or you could suspend some of your disbelief during it, it's a fantastic story. Very well written, great characterisation, ruined by some of the worst dinosaur effects ever. I mean, really, really
BBC budget.
Bad. I mean, yeah, but you try and do what you can within a budget. You know, you should say this is what we could do. You don't and which is a bit of a shame actually, because the script itself is fantastic. And I remember as a kid reading the Target novelisation. It's a bit like I remember as a kid reading the Target novelisation, Doctor Who and the Silurians, which was Doctor Who and the Cave Monsters, and the drawing of the Silurians and the way they looked and the way it was written, they just seemed like such an awesome monster. And then you watch the video of it and it's all going like this, and it's men in rubber suits. But you know, the special effects are very wonky. And what's a shame is everything outside is literally like, you've got this episode of which you've got, there's only probably a minute or 2 minutes of bad special effects, so you've got literally like 20 minutes of each episode really good. And you just wish that they had the budget to do what they've done with some of the other episodes of go in and redo that CGI. Like on something like the Ark in Space, it makes a huge difference. It's amazing how just 10 seconds of bad model work could just make everything else just seem terrible. So, but that's one. And have you seen the Android Invasion?
I love Android Invasion.
Really good story, and it's kind of interesting because it was a mixture of 2 different eras of Doctor Who. Because of course it's produced by Philip Hinchcliffe. It's got Robert Holmes, the script editor, but it was written by Terry Nation, who'd been like writing Doctor Who for how long, and it was directed by the previous producer Barry Letts. So you know, it's kind of like a whole mixture of Doctor Who eras, and just a shame that Nicholas Courtney wasn't available to be in that story.
Yes,
because otherwise it would have been a fantastic swan song for the Unit era.
Indeed, yes, absolutely. Discussion in the chat room.
What are they saying in that chat room?
Ciplio says Matt should stay for 4 years.
Well, we've got here in the trap rooms here, Brad. I don't really think Matt is strong enough to be strong enough Doctor to be the longest running.
I wouldn't agree with that.
Well, because it's actually apparently somebody else has pointed out that Matt has said he wants to be the longest running Doctor. I would love to. For me, I enjoy his Doctor up there with Tom Baker.
Yes.
In which, you know, I find he's very alien, he's very different, and there's a real unpredictability to him.
Yeah.
And there's this thing that I love about him, his character as a Doctor, where you get the impression that his attention is easily taken away. It's like when he puts a fez on or something like that, he sees something, he likes it, he's very in the moment. I really like this in the character. So I actually think he's got more characterisation and more depth than David Tennant brought to it. I think it was quite
I think so.
I went to the theatre this week.
Yeah.
Just a little fanboy moment for you. I went to the theatre this week to see the very first press night of a play called Backbeat.
Oh yes,
which is
based on a film.
Based on the film, The Life of Stuart Sutcliffe, the Beatle. And when I was in the bar just before the play started, I was standing at the bar, and this very cute blonde came up and stood next to me, and I went, "Oh my goodness, she just looks just like Georgia Moffat." And I looked up and went, "Oh, and that's David Tennant, so it probably is Georgia Moffat." So I got to stand next to Georgia Moffat and David Tennant in a bar in a theatre. Didn't say anything to them.
So you could have introduced yourself.
Yes. And who's that guy who played Tony Stark's dad in Iron Man?
I don't know the name of the actor, no.
He was in Mamma Mia.
Right.
Maybe someone can mention it in the chat rooms. He was the History Boys. He was actually sat next to me.
Okay, so Hoovian Wars says Invasion of the Dinosaurs looks like an amazing episode.
It's a great story. It's just some terrible special effects, and I noticed they kept the dinosaur special effects to a minimum in that trailer.
But I've said the colours in that trailer look. I mean, it looks really beautifully shot.
The Android Invasion though, I think, what were they called? Was it the Kralls? The monsters in that?
I think so, yeah.
And Stigron is their leader. I thought they were... What another fact, like with the Zygons, there just seemed to be this period that started... You had the Ogrons, the Draconians, then we had the Zygons, and we had then the Kralls. These amazing makeup effects, which I actually think stand up today.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Because they kind of go downhill after that with Peter Davison's era, when suddenly the budget seemed to have been slashed on the special effect makeup.
That got me. I mean, I felt they were really interesting character, the way they were written, but the Pteroleptals was a very good example in The Visitation. It was just a solid suit, so it couldn't do any expression or stuff like that. I think it would have been great to have seen some of those monsters. I'm like, why have we never had the Draconians or the Zygons or the Kralls back? I'd love to see them back.
50th anniversary, folks. 50th anniversary.
They're going to bring
everybody comes back.
Everybody comes back. And Tom Baker introduces them all.
Lots of companion talk in the Ustream chat room.
Okay.
Hoovian War says, "I'm sorry to say, but I hated Rose Tyler ever since the first episode."
Well, we got Brad in here, says Dodo was the worst companion ever. Scipio said she was barely a character at all. And Scipio also echoes my own comments. When you watch Torchwood, you can't imagine the Doctor ever coming onto the show, whereas you can with the Sarah Jane Adventures.
And of course,
the Doctor has actually
appeared twice on Sarah Jane.
On the Sarah Jane Adventures.
And in great stories.
Yeah.
Right, Sean, was it Dominic Cooper?
Yes, that's it.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's
exactly
Elizabeth Oriana helping us out there. Hoovian War says most of the 7th Doctor episodes were amazing for the budget, except for one Paradise Cough.
A Paradise Tower. You know, it was very odd, I find, with the 7th Doctor. And actually, considering the budget, the special effects, and the look of it, I don't think there's anything wrong. I think a lot of the Sylvester McCoy's era holds up well today. I find it very interesting with Sylvester McCoy in that I found that his stories are either brilliant or unwatchable. And I felt his first season was for utterly unwatchable stories. Dragonfire, Paradise Towers, Time and the Rani. But then suddenly you start getting ones like Remembrance of the Daleks, Greatest Show in the Galaxy, Ghostlight, Survival, Battlefield.
Well, we hope to be doing a special at some point on the Sylvester McCoy era, so keep tuned onto our Twitter for updates on that.
Yes. It'd be nice to do a special on each Doctor, actually.
It would be, yes. But it might even be next week if we're lucky enough. So, Sarah Jane Adventures,
yes, it's great
Sky,
to have that back.
And the Curse of Clyde Langer.
Yes. It's great to have the show back on the air. It's actually tinged with a bit of sadness knowing that this is like... It actually feels worse than hearing the show being cancelled. It's
got a very... I have to say, watching Sky was very strange because even though you knew it's the beginning of the end, they've introduced a new character to start a whole new beginning, and it's like, you know, the stories haven't been written knowing that they were being finished. And so it's there's almost a slight disconnect, I think, when watching it, that, you know, you're kind of feeling, wow, how are they going to end this? But actually, of course, they're not ending it because that's not what the intention of the story was.
It's just going to stop.
It's just going to stop.
But, you know, I kind of like that in a way, like it happened on the TV show Angel or happened with the 7th Doctor, where it just stops. But you get the impression that she's out there having more adventures, doing good.
Yeah.
I mean...
Okay, so last week's episode, Sky.
Some impressive makeup jobs there.
Impressive makeup job. A whole new character in this. Do
you think they're changing the kids around too much? It just seems to be there being new kids each season.
I think they do, and I didn't really understand the point of Sky, of why they're introducing this new character.
I couldn't even understand why they introduced a character called the Rani. I was sure that was Russell T Davies trying to mess with all our heads.
Rani is actually quite a popular Indian name.
Yeah, I know, but we've already got a character on Doctor Who called Rani.
That's the Rani, not Rani.
They wouldn't do that on other shows.
Of course, there's also Bannerman Road.
Yeah.
I mean, you know. Well, we can talk about that in our Sylvester McCoy special. Is that somehow a nod to the era of Sylvester McCoy? Who knows? But was there some sort of strange disconnect between the production team of Doctor Who and the production team of Sarah Jane, where no one's referring to each other because suddenly we have two babies who are born as weapons and trained as weapons, and it's like, should that have happened? Should we have a story in Sarah Jane about a baby who's being bred as a weapon when we've just had this as the major story in Doctor Who?
There would have been communication with them. But you've got to remember who's producing Sarah Jane at the moment, because originally they were all under Russell T Davis's umbrella, and now Russell T Davis is only in charge of Torchwood, by my understanding. And I've heard nothing of Moffat having anything to do with Sarah Jane. So it is quite plausible that the production teams are just off on their own, doing their own thing.
Because you would have thought that storyline would have had to have been signed off saying that's okay, because it just seems too bizarre that they're both sharing the same idea.
Yeah.
And surely that takes away really one from the other, because it's like, well, they're just regurgitating another story, and it's...
But, they do. It is unfortunate regurgitating a story so close to each other.
Yeah.
But Doctor Who, they do have. I mean, like, you only have to watch Star Trek shows. Every single new Star Trek series, they just drag in the scripts from one of the old Star Trek shows. There was always the first one is an episode where they all get sick.
Yes. Okay, so we've had some tweets.
Twitter.
Some tweets. Tweets about Sky.
Right, Stormageddon's always tweeting us.
Stormageddon 24.
Yes. Thank you, Sean. Sarah Jane Adventures Sky was the most entertaining episode of Sarah Jane Adventures so far. I'm going to miss this amazing show.
And Ian Redman at IanRDW. Brilliant. Great build-up and mystery in part 1. It was sad watching what we now know to be the beginning of the end. Yeah, so...
I think that is going to make it, that feeling is going to be across the whole show. It's actually worse than a cancellation, just knowing that a show is coming to an end for such reasons.
Yeah, I just somehow felt very disconnected to Sky. I think the storyline, but also just introducing a new character when you know it's going to be the end just seemed really, really weird.
It is, but that's not the production
That's not
team's
it's not their fault. No, it's just how
they knew
I could relate to it.
I'm very sure if they realised they had 6 episodes to go, they wouldn't introduce a new character.
Whereas this week's story, The Curse of Clyde Langer, I completely feel differently about. I just thought this was fantastic. This was everything that you expect from Sarah Jane Adventures. Really, it's that kind of adventure. Clyde Langer, he's such a great actor. This kid as well. He's an enjoyable character, and it's like if one of these kids gets the chance to be in Doctor Who in a storyline, then you'd hope it's be Clyde Langer, really, because
it's been interesting because they've had Torchwood. They haven't had Doctor Who crossover into Torchwood. They've had Torchwood crossover into Doctor Who.
Yeah. And
it is interesting. The Doctor has gone on to the Sarah Jane Adventures, but we haven't had any of the kids come on to Doctor Who so far. And now that the show is no longer in production. That's actually something that maybe would actually be something good for the next season of Doctor Who, to do an episode in which the Doctor encounters these kids and can tie up their storylines within an episode of Doctor Who.
I mean, could Rani and Clyde be companions?
I don't think that's going to happen, but the one thing is, I would rather they didn't kill off Sarah Jane.
No, I think
having them kill off the Brigadier, I could kind of take that.
Yes.
It kind of just seemed. Whereas with Sarah Jane, I would just like to think of her still out there with more adventures in her.
Although, of course, being the Doctor in his time travel, it's like, why didn't he call the Brigadier when he was in his young...
Oh, no, because he wanted him at that specific point.
I know, of course, no, absolutely. But also, time is really strange in Doctor Who anyway.
It doesn't
quite work anyway.
Stephen Moffat, it definitely doesn't work.
But Clyde, I think, could work as a companion, in the sort of young kid role if there was obviously an older
other
companion involved as well.
Though is this is a character that was created by Russell T Davies,
yeah.
and so I'm sure Stephen Moffat's going to want to use his own characters.
But I like the story. The totem. I thought the special effects for the totem were quite fun as well. The story. Clyde's name becomes cursed, and so anyone who utters his name ends up hating him. Just a simple idea, but done really effectively.
Sometimes a simple idea is the best one to launch a storyline with.
The subplot where he's being helped by the homeless girl, who then in the end it's like, was actually she just part of his imagination?
Yes.
Was she even real?
And,
could that have been part of the curse? Somehow it's like, something inside him who's helping him to actually fight the curse.
And we've also got that season 4's coming on DVD soon.
We do indeed.
Do you know the dates?
Yes, October the 31st.
Right.
So pre-order now on all your usual places.
But it's not out on Blu-ray.
I think it might be coming out on Blu-ray.
That's
yeah, because I think that series was done on Blu-ray, whereas I think previous ones aren't available.
I currently have a policy, with the exception of classic Doctor Who. I will not buy anything unless it's on Blu-ray.
Well, I will if it's cheap enough, and I don't need to see it on Blu-ray.
It's just a policy of mine. Okay, we're going to now look at season 6. Have a roundup of what we all thought of season 6. Get in the message board.
Yes.
Get on Twitter and let us know, what did you think of the last season of Doctor Who? I'm actually referring it to season 7,
Well, it does feel like it was Series 7 because we had
the specials here, and that actually felt like a season all in itself. Actually.
Indeed, yeah, no, I agree. But the specials are technically hitched to the previous series.
I know that, right.
But, okay, so tweet us in the chat room, on Twitter. Let us know what your favourite episode was.
For me, what I felt really marked this season, if anything, was that we had some absolutely fantastic individual stories.
Yes.
There were one or two, some of the best individual stories we've had, and it's actually taken a real long time. That when Doctor Who came back in this 44-minute format, obviously aping the American style, and having one episode stories, initially it had the one episode stories, it had real problem working into that format. And
that's obviously, and that was, I think, highlighted by the fact that the sonic screwdriver suddenly became this instrument that can literally do anything you possibly ever want it to do.
Well, but this year we've had the Doctor's wife, had the girl who waited. We've just had some pretty amazing. What was the one with the Minotaur? What was that one called?
The God Complex.
The God Complex. We've had some fantastic standalone one-off episodes. Some of these have been the best. And if I had any area to criticise this story, it's been the art plot line. I thought was an absolute complete mess, and which surprised me because usually Stephen Moffat stuff is so immaculately put together, and the guy must have this amazing brain, which must be like a Nymon maze in there. But I was a bit disappointed by this year's.
They created River Song in the Silence of the Library and gave her this unknown backstory, which was always going to be complicated and convoluted.
I didn't think it was too complicated and now it's all been
they've
explained. I did think it was very interesting to tell somebody's story backwards.
In reverse, yeah.
When River Song was originally introduced, I thought she was a fantastic character. By this season, every time she turned up, I wanted to scream. Whereas on the other hand, the flip side, every time Rory turned up last season, I wanted to scream. And this season, I just think Rory has grown so much as a character. Yeah, no,
Rory has really been a fantastic character this series, and he has been the companion really for this series.
Well, I also think and I felt Billy Piper had this problem in the second series of Doctor Who. I felt with Rory, with River Song, there hasn't actually been as much good writing for Amy Pond, but I really do think Karen Gillan herself has risen to the challenge. I felt she had a good episode to herself, the girl who waited,
yeah,
and she had one or two good scenes in the God Complex. But especially at the beginning of the season, it was like, we haven't worked on Rory's character, let's do some stuff with Rory. But I think Karen Gillan herself has been absolutely amazing, and plus I could watch her all day long.
Hovian Wars says Series 6 was amazing. Not my favourite series, but it has been all over the place with good and bad episodes. Good episodes such as The Doctor's Wife, Day of the Moon, and Wedding of Riversong.
I actually completely agree with that, and I think this season has had some of the absolute best episodes.
Yeah.
That have been from New Who, as they put it, and the flip side, it's had some of the worst episodes as well. I felt Let's Kill Hitler was I just thought it was a mess, that episode.
Yeah.
And I almost felt it was like Stephen Moffat had worked out how he wanted to finish off the plot line he'd already started, but realised that there were several plot threads he couldn't tie up, so had to suddenly quickly do this Let's Kill Hitler so he could introduce a shape-changing robot and Riversong's regeneration, which was all stuff that I just felt it was rushed through.
No, sure. Brad 1980-2013 says, think it would have been better to put Impossible Astronaut, Day of the Moon, A Good Man Goes to War, Let's Kill Hitler, and Wedding of Riversong all together as a season. I mean, if they're doing half season arcs, it could have just been one arc, I suppose, in one go.
When they did A Good Man Goes to War, and there was all this promotion, it's supposed to be a game changer, and then.
And everyone guessed the twist.
And then, yes, it was so obvious, the twist. I was absolutely horrified that it was... I mean, actually, I mentioned that twist on this show, and everybody in the message boards had a go at me. The other thing that got me about A Good Man Goes to War, it was very frustrating listening to Riversong constantly go on, this is the Doctor's darkest hour, blah, blah, blah. You mean it was actually worse than when the Earth was pulled out of its trajectory, used as a weapon by the Daleks, and the Doctor was killed? Or, I can think of
or when the entire population were turned into the Master.
Yeah, I can think of so many other situations where the Doctor was in a far worse jam.
It was very sort of... I don't know why Stephen Moffat kept that sort of prophetic thing that RTD was. Somehow you have to prophesise what was happening for the Doctor, and it's like, why? Why do we have to have prophecy all the time?
If they hadn't built it up the way they had built it up, I actually probably would have enjoyed the episode. But because it was built up in advance, and at the beginning of the episode, it's built up as this is going to be the Doctor's most terrible adventure ever, and it was terrible for all the wrong reasons. It just, there's a bit of, I don't know, I just felt that was very disappointing.
Ciplio says, Rule 1, River talks bollocks sometimes.
But she does.
Hovian Wars thinks the bad episodes were Let's Kill Hitler, The Almost People, and Curse of the Black Spot. I'm not sure I agree on The Almost People, I have to say. I did like that as a two-part story.
I really enjoyed The Almost People, but I felt it was a very average episode.
Yeah.
It was the one story this season, and it was very classic Doctor Who. It was in a base, under siege.
Yeah.
Actually, Doctor Who has always got a lot of similarities with John Carpenter films.
Yes.
It's that typical low-budget thing, people within an enclosed space, they're on attack from the outside, like a story like The Horror of Fang Rock or something like that.
Yeah.
I felt it was a very good story, but it wasn't anything special. It wasn't good, it wasn't bad, it wasn't exceptional. It was just a good, solid story. And so that's why I'm more mentioning stories like The God Complex or The Girl Who Waited or The Doctor's Wife, which were exceptionally good. I felt the Ganger storyline and The Black Spot, they weren't classic stories, but they were good, solid stories. Indeed. Which provided a lot of entertainment.
So at Doctor Who F82 says, Season 6.2 far outshone 6.1 with some great storytelling and brilliant drama, which, if not terrifying you, could have made you weep.
That's actually where Doctor Who, I think, new Doctor Who, is a lot better. You might disagree, have your own view, but it's one where it differs to classic Doctor Who. Is they like to push the emotion button.
Yeah,
they're very good at it. Now, Paul Bowler, he says season 6.2 of Doctor Who was better than the first half and just kept building each week. Night Terrors and 2 River songs were great.
We're sorry, guys. We've just got a little problem with the Wirecast, which is not letting me switch between the camera shots.
Oh, boom. So you're going to have to sit here and just look at tweets all night as we review Colony of Space.
We're going to have to just go offline for literally, hopefully, not more than a minute. So please bear with us. I think we're back on, guys. We're back on?
We're back on?
We're back on. So tell us you can all hear us. And
are we back? We're back. Now that's the thing about doing something live. Just anything can happen. It's like when you watch one of those live TV shows from the BBC recorded in the 50s or 60s.
Yeah.
And somebody has a heart attack and dies in the background. Just something can happen. And our software crashed.
So, at Paul Bowler says, Season 6.2 of Doctor Who was better than the first half and just kept building each week. Night Terrors and and the Wedding of Riversong were great. And he continues and says, also, I think Matt Smith has got better as a Doctor in Series 6.2. He's really putting his own stamp on the role now.
I think he's fantastic. I absolutely love his performance as the Doctor. I'd agree. I think the second half of the season was better because you had more standout storylines. I felt it started when I watched Let's Kill Hitler. I was like, oh no, this is going to be awful. But I felt the rest of the season just went on brilliantly, and even the final episode, which I was expecting to be terrible based on the previous Riversong episodes that season, actually I ended up really enjoying a lot.
Well, we did ask people what they thought was their favourite episode.
Yeah.
And we had The Girl Who Waited from...
This is Shelley Gage.
Yeah.
Hello, Shelley.
Because it gave Amy the chance to shine on her own, and also because it breaks my heart. Moobit said, Let's Kill Hitler, John Woo gun kata style, close quarters face off with added banana. And Reese Doctor Who Parton says The Girl Who Waited because it's just magnificent. And Jess OSB said The Doctor's Wife.
Well, I think it's going to be very interesting when you get something like Doctor Who Monthly does its annual poll or whatever. I think that the votes are going to be very much split between classic long-term Doctor Who fans like ourselves are going to have liked The Doctor's Wife.
Doctor's Wife, yeah.
Or they might be drawn also to the God Complex.
Yeah.
Because those drew very much on the history and the strong mythology of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
That said, though, I think a lot of fans who are the younger fans, who are just fans of the more recent Doctor Who, I think they're going to be voting for The Girl Who Waited. I think that's going to be a hugely popular one as well. So I think it's going to be between those three. With the fact, for me, I really liked the fact that the God Complex, just sticking the 9 on in there was enough for me.
Because I guess it was such a random old classic character, wasn't it?
The one thing I haven't liked, which has annoyed me this season, is there's certain big monsters, villains in Doctor Who it's always very exciting to see the Doctor face off against them, and I was very, very disappointed that they just now seem to reduce like cameo appearances.
Yeah.
It almost reminds me of like in Star Trek when they're just part of the universe, so you can have an episode with a Klingon wandering around or something like that. Doctor Who, it's always, if the Daleks were turning up, it was going to be the Daleks or the Cybermen or the Sontarans only turned up if it was a major storyline that they were the focal point of. And instead, this season, we've had them really just turning up for cameo appearances.
Yeah.
And as a fan of those, I just actually find it, and I could take having them for cameo appearance if they did have a good story later that season, but instead just seeing the Cybermen and the Sontarans turning up in this silly way has been a bit frustrating for me.
T. Chalky says, I enjoyed The Almost People because it was a traditional story.
It was. That was probably the most traditional one this season.
And he also said, T. Chalky also says, closing time was good, up to the point that the Cybermen were destroyed by love.
That was a bit silly. Closing Time I felt interesting because I felt it was a two-part story turned into one, and I felt you had the story of the Doctor and James Corden's character.
Yeah.
You had that story there, and you also had the Cyberman story. And I really think that to give both of them time to breathe, it should have been a two-part episode. So what they did was they focused on the character, and I can understand that, the character building aspects for the 11th Doctor and James Corden's character, and the Cybermen thing almost felt like it was like thrown in there because they just had to have something in that episode. It was great seeing the Cybermats done so well, but the Cybermen itself, I just felt they were completely wasted. And I actually feel I'm waiting for a good Cyberman story in new Doctor Who.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to get it. I actually don't think we're going to get it.
Because each time they've turned up, the first time they turned up is their origin story. And so we've got Trigger from Fools and Horses going around in his wheelchair as the Davros character. And the Cybermen, like it was with the Daleks and Genesis of the Daleks, are very much the background character. But it's building them up for their return.
Yeah.
And then when they returned later in that season, they turned up and then the Daleks took over and they became centre stage. And it was kind of not so bad when they turned up for the Christmas special, but that girl from Ballykiss Angel, it was very much her story. She was like, God, who was the character from Invasion? Invasion. She was very much like that, the human collaborator with the Cybermen.
Yes, sure,
really her story, the character, the Kevin Stoney character, was very much her story. And then, since then, they've just been reduced to cameo appearances. And I just, really feel we could just do with a really good... We've had we've had a lot of really good... This is probably the first season we haven't had a good Dalek story.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad they're being rested, to be honest.
I'm not.
Kick the camera there.
Sorry. That sounds like the name of a fanzine. Kick the camera.
Kick the camera. How's our framing? It's alright still. I don't know if people are having problems with Ustream. It seems to be okay in YouTube, but Ustream seems to be a bit sort of buggy at the moment. I think the trick is just to keep refreshing if you're watching in Ustream, or come over to the YouTube page at youtube.com/thosevideoguystv, where the picture seems to be fine. Tobias Vaughan, T-Chalk Hero, which of course we just reviewed.
Or Mavic, I was about to call him Mavic Chen, but yes. Tobias Vaughan. Now, I'm a great believer in, I love the Cybermen, not that I love the Daleks. The Daleks are my favourite Doctor Who villain, and I don't see any problem with them having an episode or two episodes to themselves each season. I mean, originally, during Hartnell's period and Troughton's period and then John Pertwee's period, they virtually got a story each season.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until Genesis of the Daleks they were rested for a long period and everything. And, I have, because as soon as the Daleks turn up, the Doctor's going to be really tested. So I'm a big fan of a Dalek story each season.
Really?
Yes.
See, I don't agree. I just think the stories, because they are big, you can't have too many big stories all the time, because it just it takes away from the magic of big stories. I tell you though, who I'm still waiting for them to bring back, and it's the last ones because they've done everybody else, is the Ice Warriors. Indeed, yes. Although actually, because now they've done the Silurians and Sea Devils. If you're going to be in monsters who have had more than one appearance, because we've also had the Autons as well. We're going to need the Ice Warriors. We're going to need the Great Intelligence. We're going to need the Mara. Yeah. And we need the Ogrons. I think the Ogrons should come in, but the thing is, they should come in with, or they can. Well, they don't. They're mercenaries. They're mercenaries for hire. They're mercenaries for hire. I mean, and actually, I thought there's no reason why the Silence couldn't use them as hired thugs. But really, I thought that was a brilliant conceit in Day of the Daleks, and I'm surprised it wasn't used more. Why would the Daleks want to risk their own kind? It's a bit like the Roman Empire or the British Empire. You have foot soldiers. You send the foreigners in first.
And that, the British Army would always send the Irish Guard in or the Gurkhas in first.
Indeed.
And the Roman Army would always send their German or their Spanish troops in first. You don't risk your own kind. So if the Daleks are going to war with somebody, hire some Ogrons and use them as the cannon fodder.
More tweets. At Shelley Gage says, The Girl Who Waited was her favourite episode of Series 32. Cool concept, good effects, brilliant writing, amazing performances, and it made me cry like a baby.
Aww. Now, Miss Adric.
Miss Adric too.
Oh my goodness. There's
obviously
two wives of Adric.
There are.
Has to be the Doctor's wife. The title makes you think one thing when it's really another. Gorgeous writing, beautiful acting.
And at ATSM Podcast says, Dr. Phil's fave is still the Doctor's wife, especially the moment musical cue when the Doctor hears all of the Time Lord distress calls as the camera pans around Matt Smith. A moment where I really felt that anything was possible again in the Who universe. Okay, well, why don't we show the trailer for the Doctor's wife?
I've got mail. There's a living Time Lord still out there.
The house? What's the house?
We walk on his back, breathe his air, eat his food.
And do my will.
The little boxes will make you angry.
Why shouldn't I just kill you now?
Doctor Who, all new.
It's an episode that could be watched over and over again, really, isn't it? It really is. It is going to go down as one of the greatest all-time greats.
I think it's very much going to be, when it comes to the votes from the Doctor Who fans, I really do believe it will be down to between whether you have been a long-term fan or a new fan.
Yeah.
I think that's what will be the deciding factor for people between The Girl Who Waited and The Doctor's Wife. But they're two fantastic stories. And as I said, you also had The God Complex, another fantastic story. I think there's been a lot of really good individual stories this season, some really first-class one. Oddly enough, it's the Ark storyline which has been wanting, whereas very previously in previous series it was the other way round.
Now, so I can't remember, but I remember...
To Amy Pond, that's what I want for Christmas.
I remember reading in someone's comments about The Girl Who Waited, it's like, she's really pissed off with Rory because he made her wait for 30 years, but he had to wait 2,000 years, and he was... Yeah. He wasn't that pissed off. He was quite reasonable about it.
That's the way guys are with girls. You don't keep a beautiful girl waiting.
2,000 years. That's.
I'd wait 2,000 years for Karen Gillan.
Two more tweets. Favourite story this season was Neil himself's The Doctor's Wife. It summed up everything that's great and good about Doctor Who. And at a police box says, has to be The Doctor's Wife. A truly superb episode by Neil Gaiman. Showed me how brilliant Doctor Who is.
Right, now we should start moving on to the next section now. Going on to Fanoptica.
Actually, we've got our tweet news to read. We've got some news.
Okay. What's news?
But it's tweet news. If we can read it.
Yeah.
At Mark Ayres, RWS.
Now, he's the guy who does the music.
He does the music for the restoration.
He actually did music on the Sylvester McCoy era as well.
Audio restoration for classic DW The Demons is now complete. Tricky, particularly episode 5's noisy 16mm optical. Looking forward to seeing the final master. And RT newsfeed, the restoration team's newsfeed. Grading the Demons at TV Centre looks fantastic in its vid-fired glory. At Classic DW says, see the Invasion of the Dinosaurs episode 1 colour clips in Melbourne. I'll be premiering the full episode at DWaz's Time 5 on the 29th in London.
I so wish I could be there to see that. I want to be there, but I'm going to be at London Expo.
And then Forbidden Planet tweeted this week, new and exclusive, the Chase Doctor Who action figure set, the Mighty Mechanoid, is loose.
Fantastic. Have you noticed
And we have a picture of it. You can now order from Forbidden Planet the Mechanoid.
Well, it's actually have you noticed they've actually done character options, and Forbidden Planet have done a character box set of nearly all the Dalek stories. I think they've done from Genesis of the Daleks onwards, all of them. So
you should be able to collect every single type of Dalek that's ever.
You should, yes.
But they haven't done the Have they? Oh no, they have done the big gun Dalek, haven't they?
They have. That's
part of the box set.
That's part of the Revelation of the Daleks box set. They've done Genesis of the Daleks, Destiny of the Daleks.
Well, I have to say, I mean,
That looks awesome.
You get the mechanoid in this box set, but the other 2 Daleks are just 2 Daleks, which we've had. I think this is the same Dalek that you get with the William Hartnell character.
Yeah.
With a box set as well. But there is actually a Dalek with in the enemies of the Doctor box set as well, where it's a flaming gun Dalek. Fanoptica. Okay, Frazer Hines.
The man in the kilt.
The Highlander.
He was the longest Doctor Who companion.
The longest Doctor Who companion, indeed. That's why he had a kilt.
I can never understand Tegan. I think missed out by one story.
She should have just hung in there, yeah.
I mean, shouldn't she have said to John Nathan Turner,
I want to have the record.
Just give me an episode or 2 longer. It
would give her something else to complain about in the commentaries now, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I was the longest running. God, it was tedious. Anyway, here's Frazer Hines, everyone. Enjoy.
But I love doing Patrick. Because, I love the guy, working with him, and for 3 years we had a happy time. But the Doctor Who magazine, when Glorious Revolution came out, great write-up, blowing my own trumpet, but I just love it because it said it was lovely to hear Hines and Troughton working together after all these years. Then I realised, wait a minute, Troughton died in 87, therefore Hines is arguing with himself. Yeah. Because that's the way I do it, rather than do all Jamie's lines, then do all Patrick's. I just stand in the booth and I've got Patrick's lines blue for the TARDIS and Jamie's red for the kilt, sort of thing. So and just talk like that, which it's great, it stretches you as an actor, but you don't want it to be too easy. To the 2 Doctors, my first line when Patrick and I are in the TARDIS, look at the size of that space station, Doctor, and I changed it to look at the size of that thing, Doctor. And John Nathan Turner said, no, stop, read through. No. It says, look at the size of that space station. And Patrick goes, no. At the beginning of every show, Jamie always says, look at the size of that thing, Doctor. And I go, yes, Jamie, it is a big one, isn't it? So that's how it came about. So I told that story sort of years later. In fact, if you see the Seeds of Death, when we land in that museum, I've got it in my one-man... I do a one-man Doctor Who show, which I've got clips of all the Doctor Who's right up to the present day. We walk into that and I go, hey, look at the size of that thing, Doctor, ad-libbing. And he goes, yes, it is rather large, isn't it? But that's it. So we try to get that line in every time. So that's how I started to do it, just that one little story. And that's when they said, well, actually, you sound like Patrick, do for the big finish. In fact, when I'm doing the big finish, they'll say, it's amazing, but I have to do the hand movements. I can't just do Patrick like that. I have to do all that. And David Warner, I mean, when we do the big finish, it hasn't come out yet, but it'll be advertised soon. I did one with David Warner. And we always take the mickey out. The actors always take the mickey out. If you're doing a Welsh accent, you say, is he meant to be Pakistani then? We're bastards like that, we are. And we did this scene, and David, one of our finest actors, actually said, I have to say, Fraser, that I've just done that scene with you, and I thought I was actually working with Patrick. And that is a great accolade for David Warner to say that to me, one of our finest actors. And I was really chuffed. And again, I love talking about that story because it sounds like I'm blowing my own trumpet, but, it is lovely for an actor to say that to another actor. People say, when you left the show, I said, we would never have left if we'd known Leela was going to be a companion. But can you imagine Leela and Jamie? We're the only 2 companions that carried knives,
Knives
none
and
of this, knives and skirts. Showed our legs. But we think none of the other companions were armed. I mean, the Brigadier wasn't a companion, Captain Yates wasn't a companion. But can you imagine Patrick? The water's rising, the snakes and the alligators are about to come down the chute, and I'm about to cut his ropes, and Leela says, I'll cut the ropes. In the end, Leela and Jamie are wrestling on the floor, fighting each other to who's going to... And Doc said, for God's sake, one of you just come... I'm trying to get with bowel cancer charity to help them out. And I made up this slogan, if you feel anything wrong with your insides or you see something in the loo that you don't like, don't be embarrassed. I just say, my saying is, would you rather a doctor took your trousers off once or an undertaker take them off forever?
So very special thanks to youtube.com/catamongthepigeons6 for allowing us to use that clip. There is a much longer version of that interview on their YouTube channel, so go and check it out. Frazer Hines, how young was he when he did Doctor Who? Because I have to say, he looks
referred to as a boy.
He looks in surprisingly amazing shape, doesn't he? It really does. He looks.
He must have been in very early 20s or around then, but he's obviously kept himself.
He's kept himself in fantastic shape. Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
And really is a great companion.
Back in those days in the 60s, nobody was complaining in the press about Jamie wearing a short skirt all the time, like they are about Karen Gillan. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, as we know, in the 60s they had much shorter skirts.
Yes.
Especially in the Invasion.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our DVD review.
Well, there's a couple more Fanopticas.
Right, okay, we'll get those Fanopticas in then.
X-Redders has sent in her art.
That's very impressive.
And these were quick sketches.
Oh.
So imagine what she could do with a bit more time. I mean, amazing. Absolutely very impressive stuff. Well done. And a shout out to another podcast, The Adventures in Time and Space and Music. This is a podcast dedicated to the music of Doctor Who. So check them out at atsm.philipwcerner.com, also available on iTunes. It's a great podcast. I mean, the music of Doctor Who, there's so much to talk about. Check it out. They're big supporters of our show as well. But yes, DVD of the week.
Yes.
This one came out last week.
Yep, came out week last Monday. Colony in Space. It's a classic jumper. Well, classic as in old
era.
John Pertwee story from his second series as in the role of the Doctor. And what's actually quite interesting about this was his first story set on another world.
Yeah.
The Doctor, as you almost will remember, had been exiled to Earth by the Time Lords.
His dematerialization unit on his TARDIS had been disabled.
The lot of his memories of how to travel through time had been taken off him. And here we have, and this is one of the first times we actually see the Time Lords using the Doctor as an agent to get their job done.
Absolutely. This is setting the precedent that would eventually lead to Genesis of the Daleks.
Yes.
And of course the Key to Time.
Yeah.
So the Time Lords basically make his TARDIS work again, just so that they can take him away into 500 years into the future to look for the Master.
Well, basically what it is that
escaped.
That the Master was not he's escaped, that he's stolen information from the Time Lord's records.
Yes.
Information for the ultimate doomsday weapon with which he can control the
Now,
universe.
this episode is called The Colony in Space, but actually all other references to it, like the book, the audio play versions, they're all called Doctor Who and the Doomsday Weapon.
Yeah, actually, this is one of those cases. Remember what I said earlier about Invasion of the Dinosaurs? And oddly enough, it's by the same writer. And Malcolm Hulke's very interesting that when he would adapt his stories for novelizations for Target, he would actually expand upon them. And the Doomsday Weapon was definitely one of those where I read the book and then I saw the TV version and it was a bit disappointing.
There's actually two references to the Doomsday Weapon. One at the very start.
Yes.
In episode 1 and at the very end of episode 6, but in between there's no more references to the Doomsday Weapon.
Well, what this is really, it's a western.
Yes.
When you think about it,
yes,
it's very much a western in which you've got the colonists in outer space. You have the company come along who are very much they're a mining company, but in a western they would have been the railroad.
Okay,
company.
yeah.
And you've also got the aliens, who of course would be the natives.
Yeah.
So it really is, the structure of the plot line is very much like a western. It's a 6-part story. As typical with 6-part stories, there's not enough plot to go through, but there's so much action going on throughout it. You don't really notice that it's padded. There's always something happening, always somebody being shot, somebody. If I have one real complaint, is that the miners are so middle class. It's very typical of the BBC of the time. The writers, the miners, they're all white, very middle class, and the company, the ICM, Interplanetary Mining Corporation, who are the bad guys of this. This again is very typical of John Pertwee's era, in which big business is bad, and we've got to beware how we're treating our environment, because things are going to get worse on Earth.
Like we've seen with the Peladon stories, they're sort of talking about political things, really. Yeah. And this is... But here's the trailer. Here's the trailer. Okay.
Hello? Main Dome. Can you hear me? Our dome is being attacked. Please, you must send help.
Look at this report. I want to know for certain. The exploitation of this planet can make us rich.
If we get rid of the colonists.
This is our world. You've no right to be here.
My corporation has been assigned the mineral rights on this planet.
Even if it means turning this planet into a slag heap.
What are you up to?
Just making a few tests.
Are you some kind of scientist?
I'm every kind of scientist.
What's good for IMC is good for Earth.
Earth or your corporation's profits?
A great honor to meet you, adjudicator.
It's the Master!
We're not going to start a war. I've been chained to a bomb, hunted and shot at. Take your mark! As far as I'm concerned, the war's already started.
Get out of my way! I remind you that I am captain of this ship and I can have you executed without trial.
You will soon see the most powerful weapon ever created.
Get off this planet.
I'll send a fleet to wipe you out.
We're all going to die!
Look out!
You intend to hold the universe to ransom.
This planet could be the center of a mighty empire.
I will not join you in your absurd dreams of a galactic conquest.
Then die!
Action-packed.
I wouldn't say this is a classic story.
No.
But it's certainly a solid, enjoyable, lots of action going on. You've got a fantastic performance, but you always get a fantastic performance from Roger Delgado as the Master.
Yeah.
There's and it's so odd when you think about the other actors who played him. The brilliance of him is he's so subtle. And what I really did also love about him is, unlike the other Masters, you never once get the impression that he thinks of himself as evil. He just thinks of himself as superior.
Yeah,
he should be in charge.
Indeed,
and
yeah.
And actually, was always get the impression that he quite likes the Doctor, would like to be friends with the Doctor.
Well, he doesn't.
Can't understand why somebody of the Doctor's intelligence
can't see things his way. Yeah,
getting in his way and doesn't. And it's like at the end of the story, the Master actually turns around to the Doctor when he gets this Doomsday weapon, and he offers Doctor a half share in control of the universe, which of course the Doctor turns down. But I thought that added an extra dimension to when two people are villains. I think it always makes it more interesting when there's actually that possibility of friendship there, like with Magneto and Professor X or something like that, when two, that makes it far more interesting. Whereas later versions of the Master, he's just like this hissing, spitting villain kind of thing, which is a bit of a shame. But it's a fantastic performance from Roger Delgado as always. Probably the biggest letdown for me, and what's very funny about it was this would all change in the next season with the introduction of the Ogrons, but the makeup on the aliens is just so bad. I mean, they really do have like papier-mâché masks
heads,
on,
which
have
no expression,
no movement, no expression to them, and it looks awful. And I felt it really let it down a bit, and it's something which may have worked in a black and white story, but in a colour story it just looks
I agree. Especially the foot soldiers of the aliens, in their sort of green spandex. I mean,
it just looked terrible.
You can imagine it working much better in black and white than it did in colour, because you can just see the fact that they're just wearing spandex and it's not their skin.
But oddly enough, in the very next season, suddenly they would introduce the Ogrons, which would be, and later the Draconians. So this was all about to change. This for me was kind of like the last time for a good 10 years they had a really naff looking makeup effect.
And for Jo in this story, this is when she realises...
This was actually one of Jo's better stories.
It is, yeah. This is when she realises that the Doctor actually isn't just a scientist. He really is a time traveller, because prior to this, of course, they haven't travelled through time. They haven't travelled to other planets. The TARDIS hasn't worked. She just thinks it's a ridiculous box that he's obsessed with. And she actually goes in for the first time and actually sees that actually there is such a thing as other planets.
Brad has put in, Colony of Space was a good story, not great, but always great to see John Pertwee and Roger Delgado together. Which pretty much echoes what I was saying.
No, indeed, yes, yeah.
And T. Chalky has pointed out that Gail from Coronation Street was in it, and I have to. It's probably the only other acting job she's ever had outside of. There's some of that. That's from the Radio Times. Some of the Frank Bellamy artwork.
The artwork,
fantastic artwork.
Yeah, all lost now. But it'd be great if they could reprint those or put them as PDFs.
One of the UK's greatest comic book artists, that Frank Bellamy.
So, storyline wise, it could have worked maybe as 4 episodes. Probably better.
I think pretty much almost any 6-parter you could take would work better as a 4-parter. But
they did have the same problems that had plagued Doctor Who for 25 years, which is how do you do a convincing robot?
Yeah,
they would just never work that one out. They just all the robots seem to be the same. They just sort of go along on. They kind of look like triangle box type things and just sort of go in rollers, and they all have arms that just do that. They don't seem to be
very much like the Wotan's War Machines.
Yeah, so they're all based on the Wotan War Machine, really.
The IMC robot.
The robot that can't actually do anything because you could just easily just walk to the side and it can't attack you. But everyone just sort of stands and has to stand there and just freeze and wait for the robot to attack. But yeah,
got some nice extras on it as well.
Some nice extras. The 16mm footage looks great. Now, we've spoken about it before. Obviously, when they shoot machine guns, there's always this striping on the video because the video just couldn't handle all the gun, the gunfire. And it always makes you think, well, they already know that this problem existed. They tried it once, and you could see it happened. Why did they keep shooting video during the gunfire scenes and not start shooting them on 16mm? Since they are shooting some stuff on 16mm, wouldn't it have made sense to actually shot?
That's only the location stuff they would shoot on 16mm though. Did somebody tweet you an answer to that, or?
I don't know why they did that. No, it's an interesting, because it's like this is something that just went on for years, and it's just like, well,
the restoration team do try and reduce the effect on there, but it's not something they can't get rid of completely.
No, absolutely. It's on the master tapes essentially.
And the new season, the new season box set will be out soon, won't it?
The new season box set comes out, yes, indeed, Blu-ray and on DVD. But yeah, no, I, do get Colony in Space. It should be a part of anyone's collection, really. It's not one of the best ones.
Anybody's collection, but there are other stories you should go for first.
Yes.
I mean, although I've already got them, I'm really looking forward to next March the Revisitation box set.
Yeah.
Part number 3 is coming out. And that's going to have Robots of Death, and Tomb of the Cybermen.
Yes, I know. Definitely looking forward to that.
So I'm very much looking forward to that box set, even though I've already got those. To see them with new extras and all spruced up, that's going to be a real treat.
So, Delta and the Bannerman writer Malcolm Cole will be coming into the studio to talk about his time on Doctor Who.
Yeah. And have a chat about the Sylvester McCoy period.
We'll be chatting about that. He might be bringing a friend along as well. We're waiting to hear on that. So get watching your Sylvester McCoy DVDs in case you'll have some questions. That might even be happening next week or the week after, but we'll let you know. Just keep on our Twitter. We'll let you know, because if it's in 2 weeks' time, then we'll probably be taking next week off and then come back for that.
Yes.
But if it's next week, then obviously we'll be right back here next week.
And we'll also be having a couple of specials in November, because we've got a couple of interviews lined up with some of the Torchwood cast.
Absolutely, and anyone else who we can get who might be there.
Yeah.
But yes, it's been quite an action-packed week, really. It's been very busy. Thanks for everyone in the chat room who've left comments. Whovian Wars is very excited about Tomb of the Cybermen.
Who isn't?
Redda says thanks for showcasing her artwork.
So there we go. We may or may not be back next week. As I said, that's all dependent on our special guests. Keep an eye on our Twitter. We'll keep you updated there on when the show is next back on. Also, tweet us what DVDs you'd like us to review.
No, absolutely, because...
tweet us if you hear of any interesting Doctor Who news yourself you'd like to see covered on the show. If you see some interesting YouTube videos or some fan artwork,
something you want on Fanoptica,
something you'd love
absolutely
us to touch upon. But I'm Sean Harry.
I've been Elisar. Subscribe to the channel as well, Those Video Guys TV. Please subscribe, it really helps and supports us as well.
And thanks very much for joining us on Talking Who.